So welcome everybody. We're gonna wait a little few minutes so we have our more public. So we're gonna wait like 5 minutes, no less, like 3 minutes. Okay, thank you. Okay, so if you don't mind, I'm gonna make an introduction. We're really happy to be here because it's our third webinar in English. Remember, these webinars are for practicing our English. So you have a question, you can raise your hand and you can open your microphone or you can write your question down. So the Dr. Roberto and me can read the question and answer. Please don't be shy. Remember, it's practicing. So we relax, don't be shy, and we can help you, okay? So I'm really happy to be here because it's not only a great topic that we're gonna see today, it's about nutrition. And as you remember, this week is about nutrition. And also the doctor right now, he is here, is not only a great doctor, he's also a friend of mine and he's a really smart guy. He's a nice guy. And he kind of do those kind of researchers that has an impact in nutrition, and all the things that he does has a new information for us in a different way of view. So we're really happy to have you here, Roberto. He's a doctor also, and I'm really, really happy you to be here. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna give you the microphone and you can give us our great chat.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the lovely introduction. Well, it is really my pleasure to be here today, and I hope everyone here in the audience is having a great afternoon. I'm about to share my screen. So the topic that we're gonna talk about today is just this one: why are fats fascinating? So if you ever feel like you want to ask a question, if you want to make a comment, just feel free to type it down on the chat box or turn your microphone on. If you feel like interrupting me, just go ahead and do it. I don't have any problem with that. So I'm going to try to make this a very friendly format for everyone here. And this topic, I also feel really honored to be talking about this topic because I have a great interest since I was in the third or fourth semester of my career. So yeah, so it is a great pleasure. What can I say about it? So why are fats fascinating? So first off, I'm putting this title with a question mark. So this represents a very, very high degree commitment and responsibility, because it means that at the end of this presentation, I have to convince you that fats are indeed fascinating. So they indeed are. So if you were to ask me, I would say, yes, they are, with total 100% confidence. But the question here is, should you take my word for granted? I mean, should you believe me, or should you just think I'm crazy or something like that? Well, we're about to see that. I have to say that fats and lipids are not the same. They are both interusable words. So you might use lipids as fats and vice versa, but in reality, they're not. Lipid is any type of a diverse group of organic compounds that includes fats, oils, hormones, and other components of membranes, especially membranes that we find that we usually find in living organisms. Either it's a plant or an animal. So they are grouped together because of one very particular feature, and this is because they do not interact appreciably with water. So this is something even though it says that that is not appreciably, I know we do. We have seen that in water and oil, that they do not mix together, of course, but there are some questions that need to be raised during this lecture today. So if I were to ask you from the nutrition standpoint, how many calories do fats provide to the human body? I know there will be a lot of people here that will certainly answer this question. Most of you or all of you would answer some like 9 calories if it's a long chain triglyceride. And some other geek guys would answer some like, oh, okay, it's around 8 calories if we're talking about a medium chain triglycerides. And they will be correct. Or even 5 to 7 kilocalories if we're talking about the short chain triglycerides. So yeah, I know there's a lot of people who read a lot here, but that's why I talk about this. But if we were just to talk about fats in this way, then that would be very simplistic. I mean, that is not all of it. So just as in other nutrients, there's more about it. When we talk about protein, it's not the protein itself what we give the importance to. It's the amino acid it consists of. So just the same as in starch and glucose and cellulose and other type of carbohydrates. And there is something very important that I need to tell you, and it is as follows. Life as we know it would not be the same without fats. And this is a fact, not because I say so, because science has demonstrated that it is so. There's another question I need to raise here. And this is why are fats so important for the development of life? Because they are. Now, let me show you well, you might have heard of Alexander Oparin, and well, he's very famous for an experiment, although he was not the first person or the only person to propose it, but he might be, or at least I guess he's the most famous for. And he's very famous for an experiment in which he tried to replicate the conditions of early Earth around 3.5 billion years ago, in which he was capable of observing quasarvates in his lab. So what are quasarvates? In Spanish, we would say coacervados or even protobiontes. If you remember that, then you would be sure that they look like cells under the microscope, but they are not cells. And this is something very, very important to say. Well, one of the questions you may ask is, well, if they're not cells, what are they? But there's another very important question that we might consider in this case, and it is what's inside. Okay, if they are not cells, because, well, as far as I know, if I say the word cell, you might think of mitochondria, the nucleus, the broad endoplasmic reticulum, the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and the Golgi apparatus, and so on. But in this case, it's not that the most important thing. It's what's inside. So if you were this dimension, if you were this little, and if you were to look inside this little vesicle, you will be able to see ions like sodium and potassium and some amino acids, some of the 20 amino acids, some other different amino acids that do not make part of proteins. You're going to see lipids, you're going to see maybe glucose, methane, carbon dioxide, and many other chemical compounds. But they're not cells. They're not, I mean, this is not life. This is something that became eventually life through time, through evolution. And when I say evolution, it doesn't mean overnight. It means millions and millions of years. And so if they're not cells, how come these were the beginning of life? Well, let me tell you something. What if I told you that this property, in fact, is one of the many reasons behind the presence of life? I mean, the property of separation, because let me just go back to that slide. If you see, there's like these quasarvates have this sphere-like figure in which there's something that if we were very simplistic, we would say, okay, there's something inside this quasarvates and there's something outside the quasarvates. So we create two new terms, inside and outside. So what is in this sphere-like, what is forming this sphere-like figure? It's actually lipids on the one hand, it's fats, it's hydrophobic amino acids. So it's not only fats like in a cell, but most of it is. So this property of not mixing with water is what makes is one of the many reasons behind the presence of life on this planet. Now, it is actually separation. So this idea came to mind when I was working on this presentation. So separation might be the beginning of new great things. So if there's something that do not mix, that doesn't mean a bad thing. It might mean something completely the opposite, completely positive. Now, let's suppose, just to make this a more friendly, chat. Let's suppose that I'm going to give you a present. And can you guess what present I'm about to give you? I guess not. You're not going to guess about it. Okay, I'm going to give you a house, okay? Just for you. You ready? This is the house I'm about to give you. This is the house. Well, you might be disappointed because there's no house there. There's only a lot of, well, you can see a field, a grass field. It seems like very open wide. And then in the background, we can see a tree. Well, there's not a house. And you might be thinking right now, well, there's no house, but I can make a house using that tree. Well, maybe. But like, for instance, humans for a very long time lived in these conditions with no house, with no roof over them. So, and they called it home. So in order for life to exist, there had to be something more, right? So, and what is that? So for instance, if we were to compare, because I already made the comparison between coacervates and houses, they are, well, they don't look the same, but they can be compared in the way that they're simple and singular units where things happen. What happens, we don't know. Now there should be another question that has to be raised, and the question is, who lives there? Well, the question with the coacervates was what's inside, but when we're talking about a house, it's not what's inside, but rather who lives there. In this case, in this particular case, well, let me just be honest. A coacervate is not equivalent to a house. It would be more equivalent to something like this. Why to something like this? Because a coacervate does not have organelles. It doesn't have a nucleus. It doesn't have any mitochondria. It doesn't have the endoplasmic reticulum. It doesn't have anything. It just has molecules in it. It's not life. And of course, you might call it like a house because through time, through evolution, it gave rise to living organisms, primarily bacteria and eventually eukaryotic cells. But here the question, as I said, is who lives there? Well, in a cell, in a cell as we know it, with all these organelles, there are what we call the compartmentalization, which means that there are spaces in it. And in order for this compartmentalization to exist, there has to be some other structures. In this case, well, for instance, I'm showing you a picture where they're with 6 type of cells, 6 type of out of the 200 different type of cells that the human body has. Some of them are adipocytes, neuron, hepatocyte, enterocytes, macrophages, and erythrocytes. So as you might remember, they have different functions. They do not look alike. There's no way they look alike. And although they have the same DNA, but DNA, that's a whole different ball game, right? But in this case, they don't look the same, but they have many components in common, which is these organelles and which is fats. That is what we're here talking about this topic today. Now, what is that allowed a coacervate to become more complex? And what allowed cells to have this compartmentalization? Because a coacervate, it doesn't have anything, it doesn't have a nucleus, it doesn't have any membrane organelle. It's just like water and ions and little molecules. Well, you might remember the word micelle. which is basically a sphere-like particle composed by many phospholipids. You might remember the word liposome, which is more complex, in which we have a bilayer. When I say bilayer, I'm talking about that it has two layers, two sheets. Yeah. So if we were to look at this figure, like if we were to zoom in, then we would be able to see a bilayer sheet. So what about a bilayer sheet? The thing is that the lipids, they might serve as walls, just like your house. Just if you're in, I mean, it doesn't have to be a house. If you're in a lab, if you are in an office, if you take a look around, there's walls everywhere. And those walls allowed, those walls allow rooms to be called in a different way. I mean, you might be in the living room or in the kitchen or in your bedroom, in the garage, in the yard, whatever, in the house or in the place. So it's walls what allows that. And now, well, I mean, I love analogies, so that's why I'm keeping up. I keep talking about houses, but in this case, I need to come back to cells. I need to come back to biology, and fats serve as walls. So they allowed this compartmentalization, in which then we would have a nucleus, we would have a mitochondria and endoplasmic reticulum, and so forth. So what's special about this type of walls? Well, they create two type of spaces, an extracellular space and intracellular space. Now, and what's special about it? Well, concentration of the ion concentration is not the same outside than what it is inside. So the wall does not allow like free transportation. So there has to be something else. And of course, I'm not saying that proteins are not fascinating or that carbs are not fascinating, but today's topic is going to be fats, just like I said. And in this case, in this picture, we see an extracellular space and we see an intracellular space, and we see an exchange of ions. And these ions can be selected according to the needs of the cell. Now, since there's an outside and inside, then the cell can choose whatever whatever the cell want allowed to be in or out. And this is very necessary for the nervous impulse, for secretion, and for even for cell communication. There's a lot of examples that I can give you. So allowing having a very solid wall is primarily what allowed the evolution or cells to evolve into what they're now, into like organisms like us and many other animals. So if we just, I mean, I don't mean this to be a chemistry class, but inevitably I have to talk about chemistry, of course. So there are differences between saturated and unsaturated fatty acids. Okay, whoa, stop, go just more slowly. When I say saturated and unsaturated fatty acids, well, if you belong to the health sciences careers, of course, this might not represent a big problem, but I'm going to assume that you might not remember a lot of it. Okay, so from these fats that form these walls, these membranes, just like this one, there are different types. There are those that we call saturated, which means that in their structure, there's no other hydrogen atom that can be added. So there's no space, there's no room for them to be added. When we talk about unsaturated fatty acids, either they're trans or cis, which I'm going to talk about later. There are some carbon atoms that are not interacting with in this case with two hydrogen atoms, which means that there's space for a hydrogen atom to be added. Well, what about that? What's special about that? I mean, just go straight to it. That's what you might be thinking right now. Well, the thing is that saturated fatty acids normally work, they're more rigid. They're more like a straight line. And unsaturated fatty acids, especially cis fatty acids, they have like an elbow figure. I mean, they're not straight. They have well, it's not a curvature, it's more like an angle. So this angle is what allows the membrane to have more fluidity, to act like a fluid, and not necessarily like a wall. So even though I love analogies, analogies have to be, you know, they have to be worn off at any moment, because it doesn't work. They don't work anymore. Analogies allows us to understand the world that we cannot see, like molecules, because we cannot see that. So in order to understand, we compare them, but sometimes analogies are not perfect. And this is one of the places, because like, just like the wall that is behind me, it's not fluid. It's rock hard. It's very solid. So, but membranes, they're not like that. I mean, you can put pressure on your hands and on any of your body parts, and then they're gonna I mean, once you push it, they're gonna come down. So that's one a very rough and simple example of fluidity, but there's more about it. So the thing is, here's the thing. So these phospholipids, this fat, because they're fats that make part of the membrane. So they're composed, they're very different. Normally, a phospholipid is expected to have two types of fatty acids. One that is saturated, which is the one that is completely straight horizontally, and then the other one that is like an arm, like a flex arm, that the one that has this type of angle. Now, in this part that is in this green circle, it represents what we call the phosphate group, or the polar head. Why do we call it the polar head? Well, we call it a polar head because it interacts with water. It has some functional groups, some chemical groups that interact with water that this other part does not. So basically, there is one part of the phospholipid that does interact with water, and the other one does not interact with water. So this allows the whole bilayer to be a uniform structure, and more importantly, to be a functional structure. And of course, there are basically four types of phospholipids. I hate to name them because the pronunciation is very, very hard. Some like phosphatidylserine, phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylethanolamine, and so on. And these are basically the four types of bricks. If I were to compare the membrane with a wall, then this would be the brick. You know, these little units that make the whole structure. Now, something very important to it is the fact that organelles, I mean, you can see the nucleus and the plasma reticulum, you can see the Golgi apparatus, they need membranes. I mean, this is lipids. So basically your cells, you're composed by trillions of cells, and each of every one of them is composed by lipids. I mean, I'm not saying that over 90% of your cells are fats. I'm just saying that you cannot escape from fats. It's impossible. You need them. So in this case, just to make one more comparison, organelles and vesicles need membranes like a house needs walls. Okay, so your house needs walls. Well, unless you like to have a house with no walls, with a kitchen interconnected with the living room, with the bathroom, with your bedroom, I'm assuming that nobody wants that. Everyone likes walls. We like privacy. We like to feel protected under our house, but then we like to be overprotected within the house, if it makes any sense. And of course, I mean, just coming back to the cell, I've talked about lipids a lot, but of course the membrane is not 100% lipids. I have to be honest. There are more molecules in it, like sugars, like well, many type of carbohydrates, and the general term is sugars, of course. There are proteins, there are cholesterol, I mean, just between some phospholipids at different concentrations, depending on the cell we talk about. But in general, it serves as a wall. Okay, now this is where everything becomes more interesting and where everything becomes weird. And I'll tell you why. A cell is also like a house where you can use the bricks in the wall if you need them. Now, after I said this, you might be asking, you might be like, what the heck? I mean, why would you want a brick to be taken out from the wall? Like, why? It doesn't make any sense. Well, in real life, it doesn't make any sense. But in this really, really tiny representation of life, which is a cell, it makes total sense. And I'll tell you why. Well, you might be thinking this is violence, right? Because I mean, if you take the wall out, would you want to throw it at somebody? Well, let's see. In this case, let me just talk about inflammation. Okay, everything is connected. Just remember the break that was taken off the wall. Okay, now there are 5 cardinal signs of inflammation. So now, why are you talking about inflammation? Well, everyone has experienced inflammation, but few people are able to tell you what systematically what it represents. So it represents pain. I mean, let's assume that I just hit my elbow just straight to the wall. Okay, I'm going to feel pain. My elbow is going to become hot. There's going to be some redness on the area. There's going to be some swelling. Well, depending on how hard the strike was, and of course there might be some loss of function. I mean, if I just flex my arm, I might not be able to use it to carry things on, or to, I don't know, whatever. But I'm going to experience these 5 cardinal signs of inflammation. Let me tell you something. Fats have a very important role here, and well, this is why. Of course, this is kind of a complex immunoendocrine figure, but I promise I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. So whenever we have a injury, either if it's chemical or physical or mechanical or biological, there's going to be a vascular response, which means that all the tissues that are vascularized, that there's arteries nurturing them, there's going to be a response. So first off, there's going to be recruitment of immune cells, right? So mostly neutrophils, well, actually primarily neutrophils. And these cells are going to start producing a lot of molecules that are going to recruit other cells, and to see what's going on. I mean, this is normal. If something bad goes on in your neighborhood, of course, everyone's going to call the police, right? Everyone needs to go out and see what's going on. But in this case, I mean, here's a neutrophil, and one of the molecules that is going to be produced is the leukotriene B4. That's the name. I know it's a very strange name. When in Spanish we'd say leukotrieno, but in English it's leukotriene. And this molecule is a lipid derived. I mean, it came from a fatty acid. So it's basically fat becoming a message to all the cells, even the vascular, to the arteries to perform vasoconstriction. So, and all of this process, well, there's a lot of things that is going to happen that I'm not going to explain right now. But let's assume that every time somebody or something hurt us, we're gonna end up with wound healing. I mean, there is no pain that lasts 100 years. There's no pain. There's nothing like that. Okay, but in this process, there has to be, or at least there should be, there should happen something that will, in fact, stop inflammation. That will stop the pain. That will stop the injury. And there are some molecules that are also lipid derived. I mean, molecules that were primarily fatty acids that we call resolvins. And these resolvins they're supposed to stop the progression of the action of other molecules, such as prostaglandins, which are involved in inflammation processes, and also leukotrienes, just like this one, just like leukotriene B4. Okay, so I know there is too much onto this figure because I'm of course just overlooking. But let me show you something more related to nutrition, because in the end, we're talking about nutrition today. So your diet, of course, it needs to have lipids in it, right? So there are 2 types of lipids that we normally cannot synthesize. I mean, we're able to synthesize fats, but in this case, there are essential fatty acids. Remember that essential, normally in nutrition, we call it to molecules that we cannot synthesize. In this case, there are some type of molecules known as omega-6 fatty acids, primarily composed by arachidonic acid. And then we have omega-3 fatty acids, which is eicosapentaenoic fatty acids and docosahexaenoic fatty acids. And then we have these membrane, well, of course, those lipids are part of the membrane that we were talking about a few slides ago. These lipids serves, just imagine, just make the comparison, these lipids are the walls. Sorry, they're the bricks in the wall, okay? So each and every one of these phospholipids are walls, are bricks. So a few slides ago, I said, okay, a cell is like a house where you can take a brick and use it for whatever reasons. So this in fact, this comparison makes total sense in the terms of inflammation, because there exists one enzyme called phospholipase A2 that is able to hydrolyze these fatty acids from the membrane and use them. Of course, not well. There are other enzymes that use them to transform them into more active molecules. You might have heard them before, just like prostaglandins and leukotrienes. And this is carried out by enzymes like COX2, LOX5, and LOX15, cyclooxygenase, lipoxygenase 5 and 15. So this is normal. I mean, inflammation should not be seen as a bad thing. It is actually necessary. It is more necessary than what you think. But also, there are other molecules that come from different types of fats, different type of fatty acids, such as EPA and DHA. I just realized there's a mistake right here. Sorry for that, my bad. It should be DHA, not EHA, sorry. And then these molecules, well, the very same enzymes are able to transform EPA and DHA into other molecules called resolvins, well, among others, but resolvins are the most famous, I should say. And these molecules are responsible for what we call the resolution of inflammation, or also for the pro-resolution of inflammation. So what I'm telling you is that depending on the fats you eat, depending on the sources of fat, your body is going to act differently. It could actually perpetuate inflammation, or it could go straight to resolution of inflammation if it's necessary. Remember, not all the pain and the injury lasts 100 years. It has to come to an end. And this is the case, but it will depend on what you eat. So in this case, we have a very we have a diagram in which we become more like scientists, because this is more specific, right? We have these two molecules of substrates. Then, just like I said, there are some enzymes involved, like COX and LOX. They are expressed in different type of tissues, such as the endothelium and the epithelium, certain type of epithelium in the macrophages, and they transform EPA and DHA into very different molecules, such as 18-HEPE and 17-HDHA. Now, these molecules serve as precursors, which means that it isn't a semi-active molecule, but it's not come to an end. So it has to be transformed. It has to be further transformed by more enzymes, and these enzymes are going to transform them into fully active metabolites known as resolvins, just like I said a few moments ago. And they're going to act in specific type of cells, which I'm sure you've heard of them before, which are the leukocytes, eosinophiles, adipocytes, macrophages, and so on. Of course, this activation is not spontaneous. It's not just like the presence of the molecule tells the cell how to react or how to act. But of course, it has to be receptor mediated, which means that receptor is needed in order for the cell to understand the message, sort of saying. And of course, it's going to lead to an action, or to many actions, such as the inhibition of the NF-kappa B cascade, which is a very important protein in inflammation, which is going to stop the secretion of pro-inflammatory cytokines, such as IL-6, IL-1 beta, and TNF alpha, and so on, just like you can see right here. So so far I've compared like these actions of the cell, which with taking a break from the wall and using it. And of course, that sounds and promotes, or seems to promote, a lot of violence. But of course, I'm not promoting violence. It is more like this. It is more like taking a brick from the wall with a message, because it's not only like throwing at anyone, but it's like saying stop inflammation. But how are you going to achieve that? You're going to achieve that if you choose the right sources of fat. So in this case, and up to this point, then I would say that I'm sure everyone has heard the phrase, you are what you eat. But of course, in this case, I'm not only talking about who you are, what you eat, but also you work with what you have. So if you don't give your body essential fatty acids, such as omega-3, such as DHA and EPA, of course, inflammation might not stop at the right moment. And this is just this is just a one way of seeing everything. But of course, there's a lot more to it. So there's another question that I mentioned before, and it is very simple. So we can synthesize fats from sugar, right? I mean, because up to this point, I'm trying to sell you the idea that we need fats, and of course we do. But then you might ask yourself, you might wonder, but if we can synthesize them from sugar, from extra sugar in the diet, I mean, every time you stop eating and then you go to the fridge and I don't know, like eat a piece of cake or any type of dessert, yeah, we can synthesize fats from sugar. But just because we can, and we can partially because we cannot synthesize some types of fats, does not mean that we should look for it. Does not mean that we have to go for it and to challenge our bodies to do that. Because, well, there's many reasons that I'm going to keep talking about. Now, what if I told you that some lipids do not provide energy to the human body? And then I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, okay, cholesterol. Yeah, cholesterol is one of them too many. And cholesterol, well, let me tell you something. Cholesterol sounds like the perfect name of a villain. I mean, if you were to write a story, and I'm not talking about the Krebs cycle rap, of course, I'm talking about a very serious story, then cholesterol might be a good name for someone who's bad, right? I mean, because let's just accept it. Cholesterol has always been, I mean, among the people who study nutrition and among the people who does not understand anything about nutrition, as a bad guy, because it blocks, it is responsible for the blockage of the arteries and many other, for atherosclerosis and so on. But, well, yeah, it is in excess, of course, like many other stuff. And, well, we have to highlight the point that this is present mostly, well, not mostly, but it is present in animal fat. So if you eat a lot of animal sources, foods, then of course there's going to be a lot of cholesterol. And yeah, we can synthesize cholesterol too. Actually, well, there's, your liver is up to it, like, well, not 24 hours a day, but it doesn't have any problem synthesizing cholesterol. But yeah, we should look more to a plant-based diet in order to lower our cholesterol intake. Now, what's important about cholesterol, now that I'm touching upon this topic, is the fact that we know that it is a precursor of many other molecules, in this case hormones, that are necessary for a lot of physiological processes, such as progesterone, aldosterone, testosterone, estradiol, cortisol. Most of them have to do with the blood pressure regulation, with reproduction, even with the response to stress and many other stuff. But yeah, we need cholesterol. And of course, it is a type of fat that does not provide energy to the human body. I know that. But guess what? I wasn't talking about cholesterol, you smart guys. There's a lot more to it. So here it is. Let me tell you something that you might not know unless you paid a lot of attention to your biochemistry books in the first semester. Lipid-soluble vitamins are indeed lipids. Okay, so we call them vitamins from the nutrition standpoint, but from the biochemistry standpoint, they're lipids. And as lipids, so they are more than just what we call vitamins. They might serve as hormones. And I know what you might think. Vitamin D is a hormone. Yeah, vitamin D is a hormone. You got your 100 grade. Okay, so we have vitamin A, right? Just to wrap it up, vitamin A, well, mostly known as retinol, well, and of course beta carotene, which is the plant version of it. Well, you might be thinking about night vision, but few people think about cell division. And in fact, vitamin A has to do a lot with cell division, because it has its own receptor within our cells, mostly on cells that divide constantly, just like the intestine epithelium and just like on skin. So there's a receptor within the cell basically waiting for this molecule from this vitamin or lipid, because it's a lipid, to be bound to it so that it can activate gene transcription and gene regulation. So we might just, we might start, or we should start seeing vitamin A as something different, something that does way more than just allowing us to see in the darkness. So what about vitamin K? I'm not an expert on vitamins, on fat soluble vitamins, okay? But I'm just trying to highlight what's mostly important and what normally people overlook. So vitamin K is mostly known for its huge role on blood clotting, but also it has importance on bone metabolism. As far as I know, or well, yeah, as far as I know, because I'm not an expert on vitamin K, vitamin K does not have a known receptor. Maybe someone in the audience might say, okay, no, I know a receptor. Well, that would be great, because I don't know, I'm not an expert in vitamin K, but it does more. So if it does something on bone metabolism, so there might be a possibility that it does have a receptor. So many of the receptors, I mean, we don't know everything about biology and let alone molecular biology, but there might be, okay? And well, let's just go into vitamin E. There's some fun facts about vitamin E, because everyone says, okay, vitamin E is an antioxidant and that's it. Well, it is an antioxidant, that's correct. It encourages and enforces cell protection. Well, mostly protects your DNA from the oxidative stress damage. But also vitamin E is the best friend forever of vitamin C. So how come? Vitamin C is all the time dying for us, all the time. And there's one molecule that restores it, and that molecule is vitamin E. So vitamin E is a very important molecule that restores the active form of vitamin C, so that it can restore the active form of I don't know what's pronounced, glutathione. I think it's glutathione. I normally don't say glutathione in English, but yeah. So here, I'm not sure whether you knew this, but as much as vitamin C that you can take, you need also vitamin E, so that the whole cycle works together and so that it works completely. So finally, last but not least, we have vitamin D, which is, of course, a very long name, 125 hydroxycholecalciferol. And then, well, most people know it for the role it exerts on bone metabolism, but of course, there's more to it. It has a huge role on immunity. And in fact, on 2020, the last year, there were a lot of papers, a lot of scientific articles related to vitamin D and its role on COVID-19 development and severity. So yeah, vitamin D, well, before the COVID-19 pandemic, vitamin D had already been seen as a vitamin with many other actions. But last year, if you just make a quick search on PubMed, for instance, you will see that there are a lot of papers on 2020 talking about or approaching vitamin D because of the immunity role it plays. So let me just sum it up, okay? So at the beginning of this lecture, I said that life could take place primarily thanks to fats, thanks to this type of walls that allow the cells to evolve, to be, and of course, to be different from other cells and to create a more complex type of living organisms. Some fats modulate inflammation, acting as messages to immune cells, just like, remember the break with the stop inflammation, por favor, message on it. And then last but not least, some lipid-soluble vitamins are in fact fats capable of regulating genes. So basically, I'm telling you that thanks to fats, partially we're here, that we can defend ourselves from the outside thanks to fats, and that some of their gene regulation in terms of immunity and also in terms of bone homeostasis and bone metabolism is because of fats and gene regulation and cell division, for instance. So there's a lot more to fats than we normally think. So in my opinion, and I hope that in your opinion, after this lecture, fats should not be seen as a number that we want to avoid at all costs. Of course, just don't misunderstand me. We need to take very close look at these signs, right? At the nutrition facts tags. But I mean, we should not be like constantly avoiding fats. In fact, you cannot escape from fats. Whatever you eat, unless it is maybe undergone a very specific process, is going to have fats, because whatever you eat, either a plant or an animal, it is composed by cells, and cells need fats in order to have these membranes. So to me, fats are fascinating. There is no deny about me. You might not agree with me. This is my standpoint, and I think it would always be. And one of the most important recommendations that not only me, but we all nutritionists, dietitians do, is choose wisely. I mean, when I say choose wisely, it means just make your diet varied enough just to select from different types of healthy fat sources, such as linseed or flaxseed, chia, salmon, avocado, egg, or even if you want to take it as a supplement, doesn't matter. Just choose wisely. So you can escape from fats. They're fascinating. Well, thank you very much, and I hope you have enjoyed this lecture. And let me remind you that if you want to ask, make a question, just go ahead and type it or turn your mic on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think it's really interesting, and I hope anyone can do a question if you have any doubt. If you don't mind, I do have a lot of questions, and most of the questions that I have is about, you know, the doubts that usually the student has in the classroom. When you talk about the phospholipids, the membrane phospholipids, when they are hydrolyzed to make the prostaglandins and all the stuff, what kind of cells are used to be hydrolyzed? Can you tell us?
Sorry, I wasn't mute. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, well, the thing is that there's many things I didn't say. Of course, many. Yeah, if this was an exam when you were my teacher, I would have failed. Okay. No, but to be honest, of course, there's one very important thing that I just overlooked, and it's the fact that this process, it's called a transcellular biosynthesis, which means transcellular. It means that there are more than one type of cell involved. So on the one hand, we have the endothelium, which expresses the COX2 enzyme. And then we have, like, for instance, macrophages that express the 12-LOX or lipoxygenase. And this, it is a two-step process in which the first step involves the conversion of EPA into 18-HEPE. And then this molecule has to come out of the cell, and then it has to enter by passive diffusion into, in this case, it could be, well, I know that it is not highlighted here, but in this case, there are other types of leukocytes involved who continue this process. So it is more than one cell. But if I were to say, like, briefly, it would be the endothelium, some types of epithelium, depending on the, for instance, if we talk about the liver, yeah, there's no doubt about it. And also macrophages and neutrophils. Those are, well, neutrophils because they consist of 50 to 70% of the leukocyte population in the cell population in the blood. But it is mostly those type of cells.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we have one question on the chat. I don't know if you can open up, and this is Arturo is making the question.
Yeah, it says, will you put in the discussion the intake of omega-3 as a vitamin, and why do you think it is not considered as a vitamin? Well, maybe it is not considered as a vitamin because it can go through beta oxidation. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It is a fatty acid that under certain circumstances, it can serve as a source of energy, as a substrate to synthesize ATP, which is required for the cell by the cell, sorry. And maybe I don't know, I'm just thinking that maybe that's one of the reasons, because that doesn't happen in the case of vitamin A, vitamin D, K, or E. So that, and the other, well, I answered your second question first, and the first would be the discussion, the intake of, sorry, well, they're kind of interconnected. But yeah, I'm assuming that's why they don't put it that way, even though it's essential. But let me just tell you something. Vitamin D is considered a vitamin, and we can synthesize it. Well, of course, as long as we're healthy, we can synthesize it, and it is considered a vitamin. It is a whole different story, the fact that we might not get enough exposure to the sun and whatever the other factors are to synthesize vitamin D, but it's just like an opposite example, something that is considered a vitamin, but you might just take that tag off. I mean, just sort of saying.
Thank you. That's a really interesting question. I would like to know about your opinion about the Mexican diet and the relationship with inflammation. What is your observation about it? Why is important that the kind of diet that we have, the lipids and the inflammation the population of the Mexican group have?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of studies in terms of Latin American and the Western diet, but to be more precise and to be more local, many of the studies have pointed out that our diet, specifically in terms of omega-6 and omega-3, there should be an equilibrium in the intake of these fatty acids. Let me just be more specific. The recommended intake of omega-6 fatty acids versus omega-3 fatty acids, it varies, but of course it should be around or between 3 to 1. I mean, well, it should be something like 3 to 1. I mean, 3 times omega-6 versus 1 time omega-3, up to 6 to 1. But in reality, well, this is a recommendation according to different sources, according to different references. But in Mexico, and more specifically in this part of the country, the intake goes it goes way higher. It goes up to 12 to 14 to 1. And there are also some studies in Brazil and in the USA that say that this intake goes up to 20 or 30 to 1. So this means that normally we're giving our bodies much more omega-6 to promote inflammation. And as I said, inflammation it's not a bad thing. It's a necessary process. But the problem is that it should stop at any point. It should stop when it has to stop. But the problem is that you don't give your body enough tools to make it stop. So one of them should be like EPA or DHA, right? Or at least, well, it's not as potent alpha-linolenic acid, which is ALA, because of ALA can be transformed into EPA and DHA, but the conversion rate is really minimal. But at least it is thought to be not enough, so that we need to eat EPA and DHA sources. But yeah, the Mexican diet in this case is completely it's crazy. I mean, there's we should not be amazed by the fact that there are many people with metabolic alterations. I mean, this is just, but of course, this is just one way to see it. There's much to it. There's the adipose tissue mass that a person has, the time, genetics, and so on. But this is just one of them, and I love it because I'm actually carrying on the research right now on this topic. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you so much. I guess what on the chat, Angel Loza is asking for something.
Oh my gosh, that's a surprise. Well, for everyone here in the audience, Angel Loza is my best friend. And yeah, well, he said, are there some SNPs in the genes related to omega-3 in the Mexican population, or perhaps in the resolving genes? Well, we're about to see, my dear friend, because I'm working on some SNPs related to inflammation. There are some that have been studied in the research group that I work for, and some of them are related to the stearyl desaturase fatty acid enzymes, the enzymes that transform align to EPA and DHA, but we're looking at some polymorphisms implicated into the to be more specific, single nucleotide polymorphisms related to COX2 and LOX5. I mean, we want to see if there are people that regardless of the intake of the omega-3 fatty acids intake that they have, they might respond differently. We don't know yet, but that's part of our hypothesis. So yeah, that's I think that the answer that you're looking for is going to have to wait for at least one more year if there's no pandemic. But yeah, thank you for your question, dear friend.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't know if anyone has more questions. I have to do one question because 3 teachers told me today about this. What is your suggestion or your comments about the keto diet? Because we have 2 different, parts. Some people say they are great, and some people are not so great.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not an expert on keto diet, of course. I have to say that. So, but I'm going to give I'm going to try to give my science opinion on that, based on the fact that I love the topic on fats. And well, the biggest problem with the keto diet is its sustainability. I mean, for how long we can take it. You can push it for, and it is not socially sustainable. Well, some people might say it is if you make the right choice, the right choices. But in general, you might be. I mean, just as let me just give you an example. If you don't eat fat foods, I mean, like food rich in fats, you may have over time a deficiency of lipid soluble vitamins such as A, D, K, and E, right? And very similarly, if in your diet you don't include whole grains, fruits, vegetables, then the balance of the vitamin deficiency is going to go the opposite way. That means that you might be experimenting a deficiency of vitamin B1, thiamine and riboflavin and niacin, and even maybe folic acid. Maybe, well, cobalamin not necessarily, because you might be eating animal-based foods. But in that case, I wouldn't. In reality, I don't push for keto diet in general because of that. I mean, Mexican gastronomical culture is very rich, is very varied. So why should we just taking a look at one type of diet? I mean, like certain groups of foods. I mean, it to me doesn't make any sense at all.
Okay, thank you so much. We have another question on the chat, and I don't know the name because it says iPhone M, but it's a really good question.
Sorry. So it's I don't know if you already sent the link to register. No, sorry, that's not the way.
No, it's in other population.
Okay. Yeah, in other populations, what are the results regarding those genes implicated and the expression of COX and LOX? Are there some protective features? Well, some of the populations where this has been studied is in Japan, and most of those studies are related to cancer in general. Inflammation, of course, because there is a huge inflammatory component in cancer. But it has been, or they have been studied in the context of cancer, even gastric, prostate, and I think it's lung cancer. But as far as obesity and maybe metabolic alterations is concerned, well, they have not been explored. At least if there are two studies in which they have been associated with the expression of IL-6, which is a pro-inflammatory cytokine. But in this case, many of these studies have been completely retrospective, many of them. So particularly in the research group that I work at, we are looking at a different approach. We're looking at an interventional study because we want to see things like from now on, and we want to see, or at least we are hoping that we have very interesting results in terms of obesity and metabolic alterations. But so far it's mostly cancer. And I think it's the same person. That person said, have you considered if antioxidants derived from our traditional food, tomatoes, for example, be a protective source of against low-grade inflammation from the intake of saturated fats? Oh yeah, I mean, of course, there are many others compounds in diet that might exert an inflammatory response. Yeah, I'm not saying they don't. And mostly, well, what you say, I'm sure that that it is one added reason as to why we should not look for keto diet, because keto diet would omit this type of foods like tomato, for instance. And yeah, well, it might consider it, but just in very little amounts. But there are many other phytochemicals that might exert anti-inflammatory responses. And if we do that only on keto diet, that might not be the case. And yeah, I mean, I really enjoy and I love working with fats, but of course, I am very aware that it is just a very tiny part of nutrition. It is just a very tiny part of health, overall health, but it's a very interesting one that normally it is overlooked. I mean, like everyone here who, and like we say in Spanish, no me dejarán mentir. People who work here in nutrition sport, normally you calculate very precisely carbs and protein, but normally fats, you don't pay very much attention to it. Well, you should. Maybe you don't. At least, I'm going to speak just Spanish just for a little bit. Mientras cuadre, as long as it's normally they're just overlooked. They're neglected. Neglected means como olvidado, abandonado. I mean, I have to say it in Spanish because I feel like it's that is something that needs to be taken into consideration. But I mean, sorry si me pongo medio intenso a veces, okay?
It's okay. I don't know if anyone has more questions. And if it is not, I want to make the last question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if you know the amount of fatty acid, of the lipids in general, to progress to mitochondrial stress, specifically in hepatic mitochondrial stress. If there is an amount, a specific amount, do you know that?
I don't. It's a very interesting question, but I don't. No.
It's just, my question is because if it's an amount, it would be an amount and it would be different from the type of lipid of the fatty acid. I don't know. I don't know. It's about all you said. It came up with that question because it's really interesting.
Yeah, it is, especially because you're talking about liver and we use a liver.
Yeah,
hepatic condition. Yeah, I know. To be honest, I wish I knew, but I don't.
Okay, so I don't know, anyone has my question. Thank you so much for anyone who is participating, because their English is really well done in the writing. So thank you so much. And if there is no more question, I would like to congratulate Roberto, because it was really an interesting topic. And also it gives us a different point of view that we don't have to be afraid of lipids or the cholesterol or the fatty acids. It must be, we must think how we can give it on diet and all the impact they have in our body. So thank you so much, Roberto. Thank you so much for being here. I know you are really busy, and doing this presentation in English is not only kind of hard for the student, it's kind of hard for the teachers too. So thank you so much for the effort, and thank you so much for being here and give us something to learn.
It was my pleasure, really, and I'm looking forward to the next invitation.
Of course. Thank you so much. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. You said in the chat are saying that it was really interesting, because it is. And thank you so much. And I don't know, you want to give us again your email?
Yeah,
so
sure.
If you have any students interested in your field of research, yes, we can look for you. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. It's this one right here. Let me give you the other one, because normally they have misspellings, because there's one that is académico and the other one is académicos, but the one académicos is different. Just let me give you another one, but it should be that one,
Okay.
or even this one. This is the personal one that I use it a lot. I mean, I use both of them, but in case I don't receive your email by a misspell or something.
Okay.
Whichever.
Thank you so much. So you guys, if you are interested in this field, and of course, if you are interested in research, please let him know. So thank you so much. We learned a lot, and it was a pleasure to see you, and Evelyn and Angel also.
Yeah,
Thank you so much,
great.
guys. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Bye.